Angourie is a small town on the New South Wales north coast, just south of Yamba, and about halfway between Coffs Harbour and Byron Bay. In 1939, a mystery cryptid became a 6-month sensation until, like most cryptid creatures, it just disappeared back into the dark corners of history. It was on a Monday, 27th of November 1939, around 10:30 in the morning, that Max Rutledge was making his familiar journey driving the locomotive for the Beach Mining Company on a light rail between the treatment works and Angourie Beach with a train of empty trucks. As he came to an area where the railway passed near Angourie Creek and a swamp on the Clarence River, he noticed a large log near the line which he had never seen before in the hundreds of times he had been by. Concerned that somebody may have been attempting to place the log on the track to derail the train, he came to a stop and jumped down to investigate. Max estimated the log was at least 15 feet long, maybe up to 20 feet long. He got to within 7 to 8 yards of the log, when it suddenly rose on 4 legs and began to move towards him. The front legs, he said, were the size of a man's arms. That was enough for the engine driver to scamper back to his loco, jump into his cabin and go. The creature decided it too was no longer curious, and Max saw it amble off toward the swamp. Max got to Angourie, and in his excited state revealed what he had seen. The only creature in Australia that big which fit the description Max gave was a crocodile. There are many crocodiles in Australia, both freshwater and saltwater, but these are in the tropical north. Angourie Beach is about 700 miles from their nearest known habitation. A search party was organised by Constable Jackson, who fortuitously had spent some time living in Queensland, where crocodiles lived, and was familiar with the tracks they made. On the Friday afternoon, 1st of December 1939, police searchers found paw prints on the bank of the swamp 300 yards from where Rutledge saw the creature. 4 distinct claw marks could be made out. On the Sunday, more tracks were discovered, this time a path leading 250 yards off into vegetation, where the trail was lost. A plaster cast was taken of one of the more defined prints, which measured 4 inches long by 4.5 inches across, with 4 claws and a raised pad on the foot. Additionally, a brown and green coloured scale the size of a coin was recovered. A museum official later said the scale was from either a crocodile or an alligator. Yet the parties of police and civilian searchers, not to mention the continuous stream of sightseers driving around the nearby roads, saw nothing of the actual Angourie crocodile itself. Not that everybody believed or was bothered if a crocodile was in the vicinity. People were observed bathing in pools in the area on that weekend. Following the publicity Rutledge's account generated, the story was covered by numerous newspapers. Other witnesses who had been reluctant to speak up through fear of ridicule came forward. Local Indigenous people asked about the creature said there was a local lake near Red Rock, which they believed was the home of a debble, or supernatural being. They would not go near the lake, even to go fishing. It was said waterbirds would not land on it, and horses and cows refused to drink the water. Horses would not even sleep beside the lake. At night, they said the creature would raise to the surface and bellow with a bull-like roar. It was said that the bellowing from the lake at Red Rock ceased while the crocodile was seen at Yamba. One of the elders, a man named Bill Boney, described as 6'4" tall and extremely well built, admitted he was genuinely afraid of the crocodile. When asked if the creature could just be a big goanna, he replied that, "You meet goanna, you stop, goanna run. You meet crocodile, he stop and you run. That's the difference." Other locals spoke up about how goats had vanished in the area for years, and in more recent months cattle, especially calves, had gone missing without a trace. They too had heard the eerie bellowing in the dark of night. That weird noise had been heard for years and had been called the Angourie ghost. Later, the bellowing was explained away as the cry of a large bittern. Those who had heard it doubted that it was made by a bird, however. The earliest claimed sighting of the Angourie creature was in 1937. Charles Munro, a farmer of Clarenza, was fishing, as he normally did, at some caves near Angourie one hot day at the end of the year. The sun was shining brightly and glaring off the white sands as he crossed a small creek. Glancing down the creek, he saw a log in the shimmering water, which he fancied had the appearance of a large crocodile, sunning itself with its mouth agape. He was so struck by what he thought was a pareidolia that he retraced his steps and looked again. It still to him looked like the log resembled a crocodile. So when he returned to that spot the next day, and the log now looked just like a log, he went and checked it over. There was nothing about it now which could have created the image of a crocodile laying on it. Munro realised that he must have seen an actual creature on the log, and that it would have been something like 15 feet long. In 1938, there were 3 sightings predating Rutledge's. Arthur Gowan said he saw something indistinctly in the gloom while he was fishing. A similar report was made by Mr. and Mrs. T. Henderson of Yamba. They were fishing about April of 1938 at Pippi Beach, one night when they saw the dim outline of something crawling on the beach. They grabbed their gear and left the area in fright. A teacher named Bathgate and his wife were camping near the railway line in September 1938. There were no other campers nearby, and they believed the train line was not in use at the time. One day, as they returned to their camp from the beach, they saw what they took for a log, laying partly on the tracks and partly in a cutting. As they hadn't seen any trains running, Mr. Bathgate, who considered going and removing the log, decided not to bother. The next morning he noticed the log had gone. Only in retrospect did he realise that the bush around their camp had been strangely silent, and that they had seen no birds or animals nearby. Finally, in October 1939, tracks were seen in the mud of a slimy waterhole, overgrown by honeysuckle behind the sandhills of Pippi Beach, by Mrs. R. James. Although she failed to see what made the tracks, she was sufficiently spooked to leave the area in haste, judging by the tracks that there were 2 animals, a larger and a smaller one. The larger, she thought, must have been the biggest lizard in Australia. On the 7th of December 1939, fresh tracks of paws, and this time a dragging tail, were found yet again, without the creature itself being seen. Constable Jackson was adamant that the tracks could not have been hoaxes. Not all of them, at least. The next Saturday, 9th of December, an estimated 1,000 people came to try and catch a glimpse of the elusive beast. By now it was feared that the influx of so many people, and the warm weather drying up parts of the swamp, had repelled the creature away from the area. However, more tracks were found, this time near the golf course, which backed onto the swamp. In the vicinity was a rubbish dump, which seemed to be the attraction for the creature. Not far away was a camp occupied by indigenous people, who reported that they had heard the bellowing of something that sounded like a calf in the night. This was also quite close to the area where Mrs. James had seen the prints in October. These prints were not the same as those made earlier, according to Constable Jackson, and may have been faked. At midnight on the 13th of December, a Mr. Johnson, who was a caretaker for the Beach Mining Company, and who lived alone in an isolated shack, was woken by blood-curdling sounds outside. He locked and barricaded the doors, and waited for daylight. 2 days later, on the 15th, police found more tracks, this time 6 miles away from the original sighting location, and became convinced the creature was being deterred from the area by the presence of so many people. There had still been no new sightings when a zoologist named Marshall visited on the 22nd of December. Having surveyed the area of scrub and swamp, he said there was ample food for a large crocodile, in the form of wallabies, goannas, frogs, eels and other fish, and birds. He was convinced that a crocodile was in residence, though how it had come there was a mystery. He had come prepared to camp overnight in the area to find evidence, but having seen the size of the tracks was too cautious to do so. At the height of the craze, there had been talk of using dynamite to flush the crocodile out. steel traps baited with live goats, and rewards by local businessmen for the capture of the creature, for display. Some wires were strung across the swamp with shark hooks, baited with rotting meat, but this was quickly taken down as a public danger. Despite claims by one account, which was clearly yellow journalism, the use of dynamite was forbidden by local authorities, and no rewards were ever paid out. There were attempts to encourage Christmas visitors to come and try to spot the beast, and in nearby Grafton, Zeitsch's cordial factory manufactured a blue-coloured drink called Crocodile's Tears to cash in. The drink was quickly withdrawn from sale as the colour was too similar to kerosene. The police search was called off in March 1940, and despite two young men reporting hearing the bellowing noise of the creature in April 1940 as they were fishing, interest in the Angourie crocodile died out. The last report of the fabled beast was from the 23rd of April 1941, when two locals came across fresh tracks they found in the mud of a dried-up watercourse between Shelley Beach and Red Rock, going from the dried-up area to some large waterholes. The theory that the crocodile was one which had escaped from a circus emerged very soon after Max Rutledge stammered out his tale. A sick crocodile had been in Yamba in 1926, being treated, but it had died and been buried. Some people were convinced it had not died and had slipped away, to grow into the monster seen years later. Police dug up the spot where it was said to have been buried, and found its bones, which ended that theory. Sort of. Another crocodile had been on a boat that called into Yamba around 1930, and the rumour of escape transferred to that animal instead, despite there being no proof of it. One local claimed that there had been more than one escape, and the swamp had several dwelling in it. This was not the only out-of-place crocodilian seen in Australia. Over a decade earlier, in January 1929, in northern Western Australia, a policeman, Inspector Johnson, claimed that he saw an 8-foot-long crocodile in the Avon River. Like in Angourie, a search was made, but the creature was neither identified nor captured. Then there were occasional reports of large unidentified monitor-like lizards seen in lonely places in the outback, some of which have been described as veritable living dinosaurs. Could one of them have been responsible for the sighting? A smaller lizard, the goanna, was blamed for the northern sighting by some people. Nor was the Angourie crocodile the only weird animal seen in the area that December. On the 6th of the month, a truck driver on the Woolgoolga Road reported that a kangaroo with a brushy tail, like a fox, had bounded along the road in front of him, scattering up dust with its extraordinary appendage. The fluffy-tailed roo vanished back into the bush, away from the bemused gaze of humans, just the same as the Angourie crocodile.